13, 1970. Apollo 13 is 178,000 miles from Earth, just 2 days from a lunar landing.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
Literally a quarter of the spacecraft had blown off.
Captain Jim Lovell has only minutes to save his crew and what's left of his spacecraft.
He and his crewmates were lucky that he was in the commander's seat.
The moment of exploration becomes a desperate attempt to survive.
We were in deep trouble. The command module was dying, and it didn't have long to live.
Their only hope is to take refuge in the lunar module. But the fragile spacecraft is only designed to support 2 men and can't survive re-entry.
It was going to be pretty tough, maybe impossible to get this crew back home.
In the history of man, there are critical chapters that forge together a daring individual, a crucial situation, and an innovative technology. Fate's fusion of man, moment, machine.
This was going to be really the first exploration flight whereby we were going to concentrate on the hills to see the different types of material that might be there from what came out of Apollo 11 and 12. And I was very excited about that.
By cosmic coincidence, the optimum liftoff time for Apollo 13 is 13:13 military time in Houston. But lunar module pilot Fred Hayes is more concerned with science than superstition.
We had a lot of confidence in the equipment. We had a lot of confidence in ourselves with all the training we had done. I personally am not superstitious, so I had no qualms about the label Apollo 13.
Rounding out the crew is command module pilot Jack Swigert, a last-minute substitute for Ken Mattingly, who's been exposed to the measles.
Flight booster, S1C pre-press complete. We're on internal power and we'll go. Roger, how's it look? Ignition flight.
Apollo 13 lifts off exactly on time. The first 2 days of the flight proceed with only minor technical glitches.
13 Houston, we'd like to disable quad C and D.
So far, 13 is the smoothest Apollo mission yet.
Jack Houston, we show you down here 121,000 miles, 520 up. Okay, you're on candid camera.
55 hours into the flight, the astronauts transmit a television tour of the 2 docked spacecraft. The command module, which they've named Odyssey, and the lunar module, called Aquarius.
And you can see I'm weighing myself right now, and says I weigh actually less than 0 right now. Been a real good TV show. We think we ought to conclude it from here now. This is the crew of Apollo 13. Wish everybody there a nice evening.
Once the show is over, flight controllers want to get an accurate reading on fuel levels.
Fuels we use on board the spacecraft are cryogenic oxygen and hydrogen. Super dense, super cold liquid and vacuum insulated tanks at incredibly low temperatures of -300, -400 degrees Fahrenheit. Cryogenics react with a catalyst in a fuel cell to produce electricity, heat, and water. So these are the resources we need to go to the moon, operate around the moon, and then return to Earth, so they're enormously important.
These fuels tend to stratify in their tanks over time, causing the quantity sensors to misread. Heater fans inside the tanks are used to redistribute the contents for more accurate measurements.
Sure like to have a cryo-stir in O2 tanks.
Flight controller Cy Liebergott requests the procedure known as a cryo-stir.
13, we've got one more item for you. Jack allows me to radio up to the crew, says, okay, we need you to stir the cryos, and all 4 tanks. 2 hydrogen, 2 oxygen, 4 little switches on board.
What no one on board or at mission control knows is that deep within the bay of the service module, within inches of the liquid oxygen fuel tank, is a frayed electrical wire.
And Jack threw the 4 switches to turn the 2 fans on in each of those 4 tanks, and everything changed.
The fan motor wiring arcs.
It was like a blowtorch racing through the bay of the spacecraft until the pressure increased to the point where it blew the side of the spacecraft off.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main B bus undervolt.
See an AC bus undervolt there, guide? Or ECOM? Negative, flight. I believe the crew reported it. We may have had an instrumentation problem, flight. Roger.
Now, are you seeing an attitude problem, or are you seeing some bilevel?
It turned out very quickly to not be an instrumentation problem, but the problem was such a huge one. It's what we call a multiple systems cascading failure. It cascaded so quickly you couldn't tell where it began. So we didn't know where to begin.
The explosion also causes an unstoppable leak in oxygen tank 1, the only other resource for generating power and breathing air.
Okay, AC2 is showing zip.
It's a catastrophic systems failure. In less than 3 hours, the command module will be completely disabled and the crew will be out of air. 5 days into the mission, the tension begins to wear on the men as they anticipate the moment of truth, powering up the dormant command module. They're relying on the experts in mission control to devise a plan to do the unthinkable. Jumpstart a spacecraft that's been in a deep wet freeze for days. If it doesn't work, everything will have been for naught, and the astronauts won't have a chance.
I see we've gone a hell of a long time without any sleep.
Hang in there, it won't be long.
I kept interrogating the ground as we were getting closer. Do you have power-up procedures? How do we get that whole guidance system back up again? How do we get the computer back on the line? How do we get everything going? We were really worried.
We should be ready to go in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
The sequence and timing of the power-up are critical. All the essential systems need to be brought back online in just the right order at just the right time. A team of engineers and astronauts has been working around the clock for days, testing each scenario in the spacecraft simulators.
So they had enough time to get them turned on and checked out, but also so that they weren't letting them run too long so as to compromise the amount of energy that they were trying to preserve.
Another concern is that one of the command module's 3 small re-entry batteries has already been used during power-up of the lunar module. In response, NASA engineers pull off one more minor engineering miracle.
They devised a procedure to allow lunar module battery power to flow back to the command module battery charger and charge the entry batteries.
Wednesday, April 16th, 15 hours before splashdown. The checklist is finally worked out and the step-by-step instructions are sent up to the crew.
Okay, your go to start powering up the command module.
One by one, Jack Swigert throws the switches that bring Odyssey back to life.
It was excruciating to watch that power up. Is it going to power up? Was it going to power up at all? We didn't know the batteries were good. They were deep frozen for 4 days. It was about as much tension as you'd ever want to experience.
We got it. Odyssey's powered up.
After one last small course adjustment with the LEMS thrusters, it's time to jettison the service module.
SF, copy that. And there's one whole side of that spacecraft missing. Is that right? It's really a mess.
When the crew sees the extent of the damage created by the explosion, they share a silent apprehension with the men in mission control.
The concern also was that something had been damaged as a result of the explosion. The heat shield could have been damaged, and so that was probably on everybody's mind, somewhat unspoken.
We'd have been in deep trouble. But there was nothing you could do. You just crossed your fingers and got squared away, got set to go.
The last major task before re-entry is to jettison the lunar module. There's no way the fragile machine can survive re-entry intact.
I'm jettison. Farewell, Aquarius, and we thank you.
We saw Aquarius leaving, and it was a sentimental moment because the lunar module was the device that really got us home. Its propulsion system, its guidance system, its attitude control system. And so we only wish that we could have saved it somehow.
Apollo 13, the age of Aquarius ended at 141 hours, 30 minutes, ground elapsed time.
At 142 hours and 40 minutes, the command module enters the Earth's atmosphere and begins the final communications blackout. For the men here in Mission Control, this will be the longest 4 minutes of the mission.
They went out of sight, properly powered up, and we figured we'd see them on the other side of blackout in 3 minutes. We all sat there waiting, and 3 minutes passed, 4 minutes passed, and boy, let me tell you, it got so quiet in this room.
And they have a clock on the wall that's basically counting down to 0. And when it hits 0, blackout should be over, and I say, okay, Joe, give him a call. Kerwin calls Odyssey, Houston, standing by.
Odyssey, Houston, standing by, over.
We didn't get any comm from it, so maybe it didn't survive.
The questions were, did the chutes fire? Was the heat shield cracked? Did they burn up? I mean, you just couldn't help thinking about stuff like that.
Odyssey, Houston, standing by, over.
And we call again, and we call again, and we call again, and now we're 1 minute since we should have heard from this crew.
Standing by for any reports.
Literally every controller is standing on their feet in this room. They're staring at those clocks, wondering what in the hell went wrong.
Odyssey, Houston, we show you on the mains. It really looks great.
The next thing we see is this picture of the spacecraft under these 3 red and white parachutes, and the emotional release in this room, and I think around the world, is so intense that literally everyone is standing crying.
Worldwide, millions of people following the saga of Apollo 13 tune in for the historic splashdown and breathe a collective sigh of relief.
We realized that although this was a failure in its original mission, that it was really a triumph on people. A group of people at the control center in Houston, along with the other NASA people working together with the flight crew, all working to change an almost certain catastrophe into a successful recovery. And that's what I think is the true story about Apollo 13.